Well, hello there, and thanks for coming to our presentation on the Mountbatten Whisper Learn station. It looks like this will be the Barbara Teskey special presentation, seeing as you're the only one who's joined so far, Barbara, but thanks for coming. Hopefully a few more will drop in along the way as well. The Mountbatten has been around for many years. It was originally developed as part of a grant given to the RNID from the Mountbatten Trust. Lord Mountbatten, as you may know from history, was out on his boat one day and the IRA took it upon themselves to blow him up. His trust provided a number of funds to RNIB for special projects, and one of the things that they wanted to develop was a new modern electronic brailer, something that could take the place of the Perkins brailer. At the time, they put together a list of specifications, what they would like it to have, and they put it out globally on a bid to find a manufacturer who would develop the product. And it was taken on by Quantum Technologies down in Australia. Since then, Quantum Technologies has gotten out of the manufacturing business. They sold their manufacturing business to a company called Harpo out of Poland, and Harpo now continues to develop the Mountbatten brailer, and it's now sold through Humanware exclusively in North America. So the model that we're now talking about is the Whisper Learn station, which is the most recent version of the brailer that's been developed. It has a lot of features that have been on previous models, but it's added a few things as well. So just to go over the broad strokes here, we have a very light touch ergonomic keyboard on the device. It has speech output. It has the ability to erase and correct. It can operate on battery. It supports multiple languages. It supports forward and backward translation to and from Braille. It has built in the APH pattern series to help train people in learning early Braille skills. It now has both USB and wireless connectivity through Bluetooth. It is capable of being plugged in and used as an embosser for Braille programs like Duxbury. It has the ability to produce Braille graphics. It's designed to print on plain paper. You can use heavier materials if you want to, right up to light plastics, which you can deal with through the multi-strike mode. It has built-in electronic note-taking with internal memory. You can connect it to a standard keyboard if you want to type in and have it produce Braille. There's now a Bluetooth app for both iOS and Android that will allow you to connect to it and see what's being brailled. You can also use that to do a two-way conversation back and forth between someone using the brailer and someone using a mobile device. And there's a music player and editor built into it. So we're going to switch over to the live view. Let me see if I could figure out how to do this here. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. All right, we're live. So this is the Mountbatten Learn station. Let me just get my notes here. So the keyboard on the Mountbatten, when they originally developed the Mountbatten down in Australia, they went out and they did a lot of research and they developed this ergonomic keyboard. The keys are spaced so that they're in a comfortable position when you lay your fingers on it. And this keyboard has now been pretty much stolen by every manufacturer in the world for their electronic note takers. They all have this same sort of layout for it. Nobody ever gives Quantum credit for it, but they were the original developer of this type of keyboard. One of the big advantages of this type of keyboard and the fact that it's electronic and very light touch is compared to a Perkins Brailler, somebody can braille on this for about 3 to 5 times longer. There was a big study done with Special Education Technology British Columbia, gosh, I don't even remember how many years ago now, but that was one of the major findings, is that you could braille 3 to 5 times longer on this than on a Perkins. So as far as the layout of it, the black keys, we have our 6 braille dots, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. In between them, we have a command key. We have a backspace key on the left. We have a forward tab key above that and a back tab key on the opposite side of the keyboard. We have at the bottom, we have new line and space. And then on the right-hand side, we have an enter key. As far as ports on the unit go, I'm going to try and turn this around for the camera. Just connect some things here. So on the left side, we have a headphone jack, so you can listen to the speech output from it. We've got our charger jack, of course. On the rear, we have a serial port and a parallel port. The serial port really isn't used for anything anymore. It was used in the past for various devices, but serial has sort of fallen away. The parallel port can still be used to connect a print printer if you have a parallel print printer. And more often than not, when we're using a print printer, we'll tend to use Epson compatible dot matrix printers because they work very well with this. Then we have a keyboard port, which is a standard PS2 keyboard port. So we'll put our keyboard in there for later use. And then on the other side, we have another serial port. This is actually used for their hardwired Mimic accessory. It's a visual display for it. And then we have our USB port. On the front, we have our handy-dandy carrying handle. Every device should have one. Then we have a 15-pin connector here. I've never actually seen this 15-pin connector used, but what it's there for is if you had somebody who had a physical limitation and wasn't able to use the main keyboard, you could build a custom keyboard for them and plug it in through that 15-pin connector. And hiding under the lip here, there's a volume control for the speech output. And of course, our power switch on the front. So now we spent a lot of time this morning making sure that we had this placed just perfectly for the camera. So now I've got to get it back roughly where it's supposed to be. Good enough, Rob?
Yeah.
All right. On the top of the unit, we have a paper roller. We have a paper lever for releasing the paper. We've got our paper guides for adjusting it to the width of the paper. And we've also got our little rod in here, which holds the paper down flat. Oftentimes we recommend for beginner users that you take this out. The reason being that if they're going up to read, it can get in the way. Really what it's there to do is it's to keep the paper from flapping up and down when you're brailing, and it just helps reduce the noise because you don't have the paper waving around. So for loading paper into it, I'm going to lift the lever. I'm going to slide the paper in. Then I'm going to adjust my guide here. Now, you have to make sure that the little rubber wheel here and here is sitting over top of the paper because that's what's actually going to drive the paper in. And I like to line it up on this back edge here because it just allows you to square it off quite nicely. And then you can drop your paper bill down. Now, there's another way to load paper as well. Some people prefer this. It's not my personal preference, but at the back of the unit, there's the slot that the paper comes out of. You can load the paper into that and have it feed up the opposite direction. Now, I find this gets trickier because you've got to get it in underneath a couple of things, but once you've got it there, you can do the same thing, line it up. and drop the paper bale down. So I'm going to fire it up here.
G'day. Charging. Loom mode. Mimic not found.
So it told us a couple of things on startup there. One, it said "G'day," which is obviously the throwback to the Australian origins of the device. It told us that we were in learn mode, and it told us that the mimic wasn't found. So we don't have a mimic plugged in on the side, obviously. There's two different modes for the device. There's a learn mode and an advanced mode. Learn mode is basically your beginner mode. And you've got two different types of speech in here. When you're in learn mode, you have recorded speech. So as we braille,
A, B, C.
We have a really nice, clear speaking voice reading our characters to us. Now, once you get into grade 2 Braille and you start getting into things like the editor, you're going to want to switch to advanced mode to get all of those features. And once you switch to advanced mode, it switches over to synthetic speech. The reason being is you simply can't record every possible combination of words and letters. You need to have that synthetic speech to do all the reading for you. One of the things that makes the Mountbatten unique is its ability to correct. Now, if you've used the Mountbatten in the past, you're probably familiar with how loud it was. And one of the things that has changed on the Whisper Writer is they've made it much, much quieter when it's brailing. So you would have to have another unit for comparison, but this is substantially quieter than it has been in the past. Now, if we want to make a correction, there's a couple of different things we can do. So I just brailled a Q. Let's say that I said, oh, darn, I really wanted an R. You could hit backspace and the letter R at the same time.
Correction.
And then it goes back and it pounds down those dots, and then it brailles an R for you. Now, it's going to be pretty much impossible to see, I think, through the webcam, but there's a tiny, tiny remnant of where that dot was that it pounded down, but you can see it visually, but there's nothing there to feel. You really can't feel the correction. The other thing you can do for a correction as well is you can hit backspace and space at the same time.
Correction. Space.
And that just completely erases the character and then moves you back to where you were. So we've now got no character there at all. The Mountbatten used to support a lot of languages. Now it supports a ton of languages. Since Harpo took it over, they've localized it for a lot more. So we now support English, and it supports both UEB as well as US, UK, and Australian Braille, the previous Braille codes before UEB came in. It supports Spanish, Italian, French, Russian, Polish, Lithuanian, German, Czech, Portuguese, Greek, Swedish, Norwegian, Finnish, Thai, Taiwanese, Mandarin, Korean, Turkish, Belgian, Dutch, Arabic, and Argentinian Spanish. It supports all of those Braille codes. The Mountbatten also provides both forward and backward translation. So forward being from print to Braille. So that can be text that's typed on a keyboard. It can be documents that are sent to the device for embossing. You can fire a text document straight through the Mountbatten and have its own translation, deal with the translation. Or you could connect to a program like Duxbury, for example, if you wanted to, and use it as an embosser. It also supports backward translation from Braille to print for print output. So you can send a Braille document through a print printer, have it printed out in regular text. The APH pattern series is built into it. You can start off from dead basic Braille and start introducing groups of contractions to a student in stages. So I believe there's 16 different groups that the APH pattern series is built on. And when the kid's doing the brailing, obviously that the patterns part isn't as important because they're going to be using the characters that they are familiar with. But where it does become important is if somebody's using the keyboard. If you plug a keyboard into here and you start typing, right now we're in just a very plain mode here, and actually that didn't work at all. Why did that not work at all?
Charging.
Oh, because I'm not in advanced mode. I'm sorry, I need to be in advanced mode, I believe, for that to work. Or
G'day. Charging. Loom mode. Mimic. Not. Space. Left. Margin.
sorry, I'm just randomly hitting keys here. Okay, so if I start typing right now, I'm getting just a one-for-one, character-for-character representation of what I typed. If I switched this into grade 2 mode, nothing's going to be brailled until I hit the enter key or I fill a line of text. The reason being is there's going to be contractions that are going to be put in use, and it's got to figure out how much text it can fit on a line before it starts printing that line. So if we had the APH pattern series turned on and we had whole word contractions turned on and somebody typed on the keyboard, again, they wouldn't get anything until they hit enter, but what they would get is one-for-one translation of any characters that were not part of that APH pattern set. But where there was the APH pattern set turned on, they would get those specific contractions that they had enabled. So for a sighted teacher working with a blind kid in the classroom, if they need to make a note to that kid, you know, maybe the itinerant teacher has gone in there and worked with the kid, set up the APH pattern series, but there's a classroom teacher who's dealing with them day to day, that teacher will be able to walk over to the keyboard, type something in, it'll be brailled out, but it'll be brailled out using only the contractions that have been taught to that kid to that point. In addition to the APH pattern series, you can also introduce individual contraction rules if you want to, by manually programming them into the device. I mentioned before that we have USB and wireless connectivity. Sorry, my phone's just decided to start ringing here. We can print from a computer using the internal translation, as I mentioned before. We can print from Duxbury. You can also send files from a computer to the Mountbatten into the internal memory, and then you can send a command on the Mountbatten itself to print that file. Braille graphics. Essentially, Braille graphics, when you put it into graphics mode, it removes the spaces between the dots, and that allows you to use characters to draw shapes. The best example I saw of this was in a workshop that we did for SET BC many years ago. We had done a 2-day workshop. We brought in the teachers the first day, and then we brought the teachers in with the kids that they were working with for the second day. And Tim Connell from Australia was up to do the workshop, and he was describing how, okay, I can start a line with the letter P, and then I can use C's to go across the page to draw a line, and then I can go down a line. And he was sitting there and he was showing us all how he could draw a box. Well, we had a kid named Bobby at the end of the table, and while Tim was describing how to draw a box, Bobby was playing away on his brailler, and by the time Tim had finished drawing his box, Bobby had drawn a Christmas tree complete with ornaments. So it is pretty cool to see kids get creative on the graphics mode, and it's a fun way to get them playing and to deal with the different shapes. Now, I mentioned that we have the ability to use plain paper with this. The Mountbatten was actually designed specifically to be able to use plain paper. And the reason for that is that in many parts of the world, it's just very difficult to get Braille paper. So they have built the head for this so that when it brailles on plain paper, it doesn't break the surface of the paper. And because it doesn't break the surface of the paper, the Braille dots last. Braille on plain paper with a Mountbatten is going to last easily the duration of the school year, even if you're throwing it in binders and stacking it. It's very good. It's very solid Braille. I've had people try and disprove me with this. They've taken the paper out of the thing, they've put it on the floor, and they've stood on it. Well, you know what? That's not going to do much for Braille on Braille paper either. But in terms of being able to go back, being able to reread, plain paper is going to work just fine for the duration of the school year. If you want something on a permanent basis, sure, maybe you'd want to put Braille paper in, but you really don't need to be using Braille paper on your day-to-day stuff. And there's an advantage to using plain paper in that it doesn't have to hit it as hard, so it's going to be a little bit quieter when you're Brailling on plain paper. There is also a multi-strike mode built into the Mountbatten. The multi-strike mode will allow you to hit any given dot up to 4 times. So once you turn it on, if you hit a letter A, it's going to pound that dot 4 times. And you can use that for things like light plastics, that you might use for Braille labeling, for example. Electronic note-taking, there is a full editor built into memory. Now, there's 2 different ways that you can create files on here. When you're in learn mode, the command to start a file is begin. You hit the command key, you type in begin, you hit the enter key to complete the command, and you hit a space and you type in the file name. Now, with the begin command, it basically opens up a file and you start brailing away, and you're getting Braille output at the same time as it's going into memory. When you finish that file, if you want to come back to it, you can then use the command append. So you do append enter, append space the file name and enter. And it will take you to the bottom of that file, and you can add on to that file. Now, that's the most basic form of note-taking for the Mountbatten. Once you go into advanced mode, you then have access to the full editor with formatting options. And at that point, you would use the term edit space file name to edit a file name, and then you can go in and you can do everything entirely with speech, just like you could on a Braille note. You have the same sorts of navigation commands for the speech output as you would on a Braille note. So this device can be a really, really good lead-in to electronic note takers when kids are getting ready to transition into a more full-fledged note taker. But then you can still use this as an embosser for that note taker if you want to. You can also connect a keyboard, as we mentioned, through the PS2 connector. And again, if you have it set for grade 2 mode, what you'll get out of it will be grade 2. It'll use the forward translation to create grade 2 Braille. If patterns is in use, it'll use the pattern series and just the contractions that have been implemented with that student. One of the big things that's been added is a new Mimic app. Where's the camera? There's the camera. So this is on my Android, and you can see I've cracked my screen there maybe, but it's still working. And I'm just going to turn off and on here. And I'm going to go to the Mountbatten tab there. And I'm going to hit the button here that says connect. And it says select the Mountbatten device. So I'm going to select the Mountbatten Brailer. Now you can hear the Mountbatten is doing a little bit of beeping, and that's the settings getting set up to communicate properly. Now it says that we're connected. I can hit done. So now I've got 2 different options available to me. I've got whiteboard.
Right.
And now with the whiteboard, it's back translating what's going on the brailler. Range on Bluetooth is roughly around 40 feet. So this would allow a teacher to monitor what's being brailled remotely. The other thing we can do here, I'm going to hit X, and I'm going to hit chat. So now with chat, I can say, hello, Steve. I probably should have capitalized that. That's my bad. Steve, how are you? Question mark. Okay.
Forward.
That message then gets brailled out. And we can have a reply. Well, I'll do my very exciting enter. Oh, sorry, new line rather. And there's the response coming back through. So you could use this as a support device for a deaf-blind student, for example. Or, you know, it can be pretty motivating. Even just the keyboard and the Braille keyboard, chatting back and forth. There's been a lot of cases where the Mountbatten has become kind of a tool for interaction in the classroom between a blind kid and their sighted peers. In the early days when we were first doing the studies with SETBC on this was another thing that came up, is that the Mountbatten really encouraged play between kids in the classroom, and allowed the sighted kids to learn a little more about Braille, and it allowed the Braille-using kid more time to practice with Braille, because they and their friends were brailing little notes back and forth. Another thing that we can do here is we have a list of users. So I've set myself up as a user, and if we go into my user file here, we have folders that I've created for different topics. So I've got a folder for English, math, and science, and then we've got files in there. Now you can upload files from the memory of the Mountbatten to the mobile device and review them on the mobile device as well, if you want to do that. The device also has music Braille built into it now. So there is a few different modes. There's a fun mode, which is basically using the keys on the Mountbatten as an instrument. There's a play mode where you actually practice using Braille notation on the keyboard, and you can hear the notes played back as you're playing on it. And then there's a complete music editor, so you can compose simple tunes on it. You can save them as a file, and you can play those back through it. So at this point, we can open it up to questions. And if there's something specific you want to see on it, I can do my best to show you. So do we have... is the keyboard USB? No, it's not. It is a PS2 keyboard, and they're now shipping these with the Mountbattens. When you order them, you'll get one of these with them, because these are getting harder to find. But yeah, this is a PS2 keyboard. We can still buy these new. Some of our suppliers still have them, but as I said, they ship with. How do you set up UEB Braille? Okay, well, the easiest way to set up UEB Braille is to switch it into Australian Braille, because the Australians have been using UEB for some time. So any Mountbatten that's out there, from the dark blue ones, the light blue ones, this gray one, if you just switch to the Australian Braille code, you'll be in UEB. Trying to remember what the command to do that is. See, I was smart enough to remember to bring the manual with me, because I knew somebody was going to ask something that I would not remember, because there's a lot of codes that you can put in on these. Okay, so first off, I'm going to get out of learn mode, and I'm going to go into advanced mode. That's command ADV. So now
Charging.
You'll notice.
G'day. Charging. Advanced mode.
So it's going to remember that. So now, if I want to change languages, I can do Command F L N space, and then the language that I want to turn on. So in this case, that's Australian, which is the code for it is OZ.
Oh, okay.
So the speech stays the same, but now the Braille code that we're using has changed. Does it do Nemeth? I guess the short answer for that is kinda. If you're doing it in hard copy Braille, yes, definitely, because what you get is what you get. I don't believe. Hang on a second. I'm just going to check the calculator. I don't believe you can store Nemeth as a file except by, manually brailing it. The speech isn't going to. It's not going to read it like math. It's just going to read the symbols at that point. But I believe the calculator does support some Nemeth. Yeah, when you're entering equations into the calculator, it expects you to type the operators such as plus, minus, and so on in Nemeth Braille, except in the UK English language, where British Mathematical Braille is used. So yeah, any Mountbatten used here in Canada is going to use Nemeth when you're doing entries into the calculator. So I think we're going to call that a wrap. Thanks for coming. Thanks for joining in today.